The United States of America is today known as the most powerful nation on Earth. It managed to tip the balance in both world wars by joining later and shaping the outcome to its advantage. After the First World War, and especially following its victory over the Soviet Union in the Cold War, the United States emerged as the single, undisputed global power. But this strength cannot be measured only in military or economic terms. American culture itself spread across the globe, shaping tastes, values, and lifestyles in a way no empire had ever done before. From the Roman Empire to the British Empire, no power in history ever achieved the kind of prestige and cultural dominance that the United States holds today. So when exactly did this nation come into being? How did it fight for its independence? To answer these questions, we must travel back roughly 2.5 centuries to the birth of the United States itself. Back in the 15th century, a frenzy for discovering new lands swept across Europe. Naturally, the British Empire could not remain indifferent. In the early 17th century, when King James I ascended the throne, he ended the ongoing war with Spain through the Treaty of London. But rather than conquering enemy lands, James sought to claim overseas territories of his own. After several failed attempts, the English finally succeeded in establishing Jamestown in the year 1607, the first permanent settlement in the Americas. Named after King James, this small town grew steadily, becoming the foothold of what Europeans began calling the New World. Over time, the New World attracted waves of settlers from across Europe. Some came chasing fortune, others seeking adventure, and many were simply desperate, ex-prisoners, outcasts, and those who saw no future in the Old World. Jamestown grew, and soon a collection of 13 colonies emerged, far from the chaos and endless wars of Europe and Asia. Here, on safer ground, the colonies flourished. They built their own communities, and through democratic practices, they grew stronger and more independent. Before long, their loyalty to the British Crown began to fade. By the mid-18th century, they were calling for unity. First in Albany and later in the Continental Congress, declaring together that it was time to stand against the empire. E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one. This powerful phrase captured a simple truth. Unity is strength, and the colonies knew that their unity had a purpose, full independence. But to justify such a break, they needed a casus belli, a cause for war. The British Empire, however, provided one soon enough. After winning the long conflict with France in the mid-18th century, Britain found itself drowning in debt. To refill its treasury, London turned to the colonies, increasing existing taxes and introducing new ones. In the year 1767, Parliament passed the Townshend Acts. These laws required that the salaries of governors and judges in the colonies be paid directly from taxes collected from the colonists themselves. To many Americans, this was unbearable. Resistance grew stronger until one day, in the harbor of Boston, angry citizens boarded a ship loaded with tea and hurled its cargo into the sea. This defiant act became known as the Boston Tea Party, and with it, the first sparks of the American Revolution were lit. By the year 1775, the colonies had chosen a commander for their new Continental Army. A tall Virginian planter and veteran officer named George Washington. He now stood at the head of 35,000 soldiers. Though he launched several bold strikes against British positions, early victories were scarce. Washington and his men lacked the experience and discipline of a professional army. For months, battles dragged on in scattered skirmishes, but the colonies soon realized they could not stand alone. Their leaders began reaching out to Europe, hoping for aid. Yet that aid would not arrive right away. On July 4, 1776, the colonies declared their determination to the entire world with the publication of the Declaration of Independence. To this day, that date is celebrated as the official birth of the United States. Even as battles raged on, Britain continued to send peace offers across the Atlantic. Yet every attempt was firmly rejected. Soon after, under the command of General Howe, British forces launched an assault on Long Island. On August 27th, George Washington's Continental Army was defeated and forced to retreat north. With Manhattan under British control, the Revolution suffered its first major setback. Still, nothing was decided. The colonists refused to surrender their resolve. Later that same year, the renowned General Cornwallis attacked Fort Lee, Washington's headquarters at the time. Though he pushed Washington's troops east of the Delaware River, a new challenge loomed. Winter was closing in. Cornwallis set up forward posts in New Jersey to dig in for the cold months. What he did not know was that his position had left him vulnerable. On Christmas night, December 25th, while British troops were distracted by holiday celebrations, George Washington led his men across the icy Delaware River. In a daring surprise attack, he struck Cornwallis's garrison at Trenton. The British fled in chaos, barely escaping with their lives. Washington pressed forward, defeating additional British reserves at Princeton soon after. These victories breathed new life into the Revolution. The Americans had proven that the mighty British Army was not invincible, yet Britain was not ready to yield. Admiral Richard Howe, brother of General Howe, arrived to take command. Landing troops on the coast, he defeated Washington's army at Brandywine on September 11th and captured Philadelphia, then the American capital, just 2 weeks later. For the moment, the advantage seemed to rest with Britain. After repeated defeats, Washington began to feel the limits of his army. Even though he managed a victory at Germantown, the Continental Army still seemed far from being able to win a decisive triumph over Britain. Searching for answers, Washington turned to a legendary Prussian officer, General von Steuben. Von Steuben accepted the call and quickly arrived in America. He drilled the troops with strict weapons training and battlefield maneuvers, imposing discipline and reshaping the army from the ground up. In a short time, the once fragile Continental Army had been transformed, and soon von Steuben's efforts would be tested in a battle that would mark a true turning point in the war. In the year 1778, at the Battle of Monmouth, Washington's rejuvenated forces held their ground and scattered British troops. Encouraged by this success, Washington pressed harder, seeking even greater support from Europe. France, which had been secretly supplying weapons since 1775, finally committed itself openly in 1778, joining the war on America's side. Spain followed in 1779, and the Dutch Republic in 1780. With this surge of European support, Washington and his Continental Army began driving British forces northward, winning victory after victory. After repeated defeats, Washington began to feel the limits of his army. Even though he managed a victory at Germantown, the Continental Army still seemed far from being able to win a decisive triumph over Britain. Searching for answers, Washington turned to a legendary Prussian officer, General von Steuben. Von Steuben accepted the call and quickly arrived in America. He drilled the troops with strict weapons training and battlefield maneuvers, imposing discipline and reshaping the army from the ground up. In a short time, the once fragile Continental Army had been transformed, and soon, von Steuben's efforts would be tested in a battle that would mark a true turning point in the war. In the year 1778, at the Battle of Monmouth, Washington's rejuvenated forces held their ground and scattered British troops. Encouraged by this success, Washington pressed harder, seeking even greater support from Europe. France, which had been secretly supplying weapons since 1775, finally committed itself openly in 1778, joining the war on America's side. Spain followed in 1779 and the Dutch Republic in 1780. With this surge of European support, Washington and his Continental Army began driving British forces northward, winning victory after victory. Without question, the support of European powers played a decisive role. Yet that support came at a heavy price. France and Spain both edged toward bankruptcy as a result of their contributions. In France, this financial collapse helped spark the French Revolution of 1789. Spain, meanwhile, faced such economic strain that it eventually lost its colonies across Latin America. The American Revolution, then, was not just a struggle for independence. It sent shockwaves across the globe, fueling change in ways both direct and indirect. History often unfolds in chains of cause and effect. One event leads to another, and by following them in sequence, we better understand the past. The American Revolution itself grew out of the 7 Years' War as Britain's attempt to recover its war debts through new taxes pushed the colonies into open rebellion. And behind every great movement stand remarkable individuals. In America, they are remembered as the Founding Fathers: John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, John Jay, James Madison, and the nation's first president, George Washington. These men shaped the Declaration of Independence, guided the war, signed the Treaty of Paris, and later drafted the Constitution of 1788. Their names are forever tied to the birth of the United States. Over time, the young republic would endure a civil war, expand westward, and gradually rise to the position it holds today. With that, we conclude our look at the American Revolution. But the journey through history does not end here. Subscribe to SGMA History and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story from the chronicles of our past. Until then, see you in the next video.